all. It's the podcast with Comedian Nazareth.
Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Laughter for All podcast. I am Comedian Nazareth. Thank you for joining me for episode number 174. Yes, people, 174 weeks together. So thank you for you who are watching right now live and those who are, will be listening to this on your favorite podcast channel. So thank you for joining us. Just to give you an update, this is the last week for a while that I'm doing this podcast because next Tuesday I will be in Fishers, Indiana for the Christian Comedy Conference and speaking there. And then on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I will be at Night Vision Festival in Colorado with Toby Mac, with Newsboys, with Phil Wickham, and Big Daddy Weave, and what do you call it, Jordan Feliz, and all these guys. So if you're in the Grand Junction area, come to on Friday and Saturday. I'll be at Night Vision, and then on Monday night, I will be at Glenwood Springs, Colorado, doing an event for a big church in there. And then I will come home for a couple days, and then we'll go into from there. I will be in Visalia, California on Friday the 16th. I'm doing an event. Then I come back on Monday and Tuesday. I'll be at Newport News, Virginia with Pat Robertson for the 700 Club CBN. I'll be there. And from there, I'm going to Orlando, Florida. I'm doing a big conference for the, Immigration Lawyers of America. And then I come home on the 24th, the 25th, much needed vacation. I'm taking my family to Europe to use all our points, so we won't be back till July 7th, and then we'll resume with our podcast. We'll resume with that. So anyway, busy month. Thank you so much. So if you were bored on a Tuesday, go back and watch one of those episodes in the past. Okay, too much talking. I'm ready to introduce this young man. I worked with him twice. Once a few years ago in Pennsylvania. We were doing the Knights of Columbus, I think, men's conference. He was amazing. And he is so young and good looking, it bothers me, but he's a great speaker. And he's a Navy SEAL, and he's been on everything. He's the guy that mentioned Jesus on CNN and and made it there. He's on Fox. He's always the go-to guy when they need any wisdom from the military and SEALs. They go to him. His name is Chad Williams. So please welcome him on the podcast. Hello, Chad. Thank you for joining.
All right. Hey, so good to be on with you. I'm excited to do this show.
Thank you so much, man. This is amazing that because yesterday was Memorial Day.
Sure. Yeah.
And I know I remember because last week or 10 days ago, we worked together at the men's conference in Corona. And you mentioned always Steve Helvenston, who was your training partner or training.
Close. Scott Helvenston.
Scott.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Scott Helvenston.
Yes.
And so as we, yesterday was Memorial Day. So tell us about a little bit, if that's okay with you, about your friend.
Sure. My first encounter with Scott was, I didn't know what I was in for. I told my dad I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I don't think he took me seriously, and for good reason, because at that time I was failing out of junior college. And then I just decided I want to go be a Navy SEAL. And so he decided to arrange a workout with this Navy SEAL, Scott Helvenston. What I didn't know, though, was this going to be more than a workout. This was going to be a real pressure test. It was going to be a beatdown. And so this phone call took place that I didn't know about, that I found out about months later over lunch with these two guys. My dad gets him on the phone and says, hey, look, my son wants to be a Navy SEAL, but he has no idea what he's getting involved in. And so I'm wondering if you'd be willing to meet up with my son, and what I'm asking you to do, I need you to just crush him, like beat this desire of becoming a SEAL out of him. And so he shot off a reply in an email, and all I see is the email. I look at this email, my dad shows me it, and it shows this guy that I don't know who he is. He met him on the internet, and it says, can Chad come out and play tomorrow? So I'm like, Dad, let me get this straight. You met some guy off the internet that says he wants to play with me, and you're going to arrange this meeting right now. And he's like, oh, he's a SEAL. I'm thinking, you can't trust everything someone tells you on the internet, Dad. Well, I go meet up with this guy, and he looks the part. He's calling me Bubba. He's like, all right, you Chad? Yes, sir. All right, Bubba, get on over here. And he looked the part because he looked like something Michelangelo carved out. And so he's got me dropped down. I'm doing push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups. Next thing I know, we go off on a run, and we wind up way out in the wetlands. He actually let me take the lead and kind of disappear on him a little bit, said he'd catch up with me. And I'm looking back, not seeing this guy. And as I'm looking back, still not seeing him, I begin to think to myself, like, wait a minute, maybe, just maybe, I'm too fast for this Navy SEAL. He can't catch up on the run. And I'm looking over my shoulder again. It's like a scene out of the movie Terminator 2, the Arnold Schwarzenegger one, where that bad guy, they call him the T-1000, could like morph into knife hands and chase down a moving vehicle. I'm looking back, and this guy's coming after me like a canine let out of the back of a squad car. I mean, he's closing right in, catches right up to where I am, and that's when I'm greeted by his fist going right into my stomach, knocking me to the ground, got the wind knocked out of me. He's jumping on top of me, just ragdolling me. I still remember the sound of just the threads of my shirt ripping, feeling the spit fly out as he's screaming in my face, hitting me in the face, in the cheek, the forehead. And I don't understand a word that's coming out of his mouth because he's going ballistic, but then these words come through. But before that, you got to put yourself in my shoes. The only intel I'm operating on here is some guy my dad met off the internet. I'm thinking child predator. Like, this is happening right now, right? I'm trying to survive. But the words that come out, he says, you want to be a Navy SEAL, you better stay 3 paces behind me. And suddenly I realized it's on. This is it. And this is for real. And I knew in that moment, the way I respond in this moment is going to forever affect the trajectory of the rest of my life. I got to be willing to die before I quit. And so I hung in there. I stayed those 3 paces behind him. And long story short, he ended up deciding that he wanted to take me under his wing. I remember we got to the end of that run. He's pacing back and forth. He looks like he wants to fight me, and he's not speaking to me. And then he breaks that awkward silence by asking me a simple question. He just says, hey, if we would have gone another mile or 2, would you stayed with me? We went miles down this trail. I just told him what came from the heart. I said, Scott, I'll die before I quit. Next thing you know, this guy that looks like a cage fighter ready for the referee to just initiate and say, let's get it on. Now he's got this big smile on his face. He's going, great. Hey, do you want to meet up again for another workout tomorrow? I'm honestly thinking, like, what kind of flashback is this guy going through right now? Like, we need to talk about what happened on that trail. But then I thought, don't bring up the physical assault because I might trigger that response again. And so I just kind of gave him a thumbs up, tried to keep everything copacetic. And thankfully, though, it was never like that again. He really did take me under his wing and mentor me. He called my pops up and said, look, I know what you want me to do, but I think your son actually might have what it takes to make it. I'd like to start meeting up with them. So from that day forward, I'm training with this Navy SEAL, Scott Helvenston. No longer these beatdowns. It became more of a building up. I moved on in life from being Bubba to one day I became Junior as he's really taken me under his wing. Funny story about Scott, and people could look this one up sometime. It was on TV. He was on a television program called Man vs. Beast, where they would take these wild animals, these beasts, and put them up against these human beings, these athletes, in competitions of strength or speed. And kind of the premise of the show was that these human beings would always lose and these beasts would be dominant. Well, they find out about Scott and his incredible ability to run an obstacle course. He holds the obstacle course record time on the SEAL Training Command. Wow. And so they go, we hear you're something special. Would you be willing to go up against the beast on Man vs. Beast? They built this obstacle course and they traded chimpanzee to run it, superhuman speed. So Scott, never being the kind of guy to back down, he's like, yeah, I'll race the monkey. And so he shows up, and this is on national television. They're on the starting line. Boom, they take off. They're going through the obstacles. What does Scott do? He pulls ahead of the monkey on monkey bars. You couldn't make it up any better. The only man to beat the beast on the TV program, Man vs. Beast, at the time. And so, yeah, you can just imagine what it's like to get trained by such a phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal human being that holds many other records I could go through too.
So before you met Scott, what were some, like you said, I would die before I quit. Where did that come from? I mean,
I understood that Navy SEAL training was the most difficult military training in the world. It has that reputation. And so I knew that you have to have that mentality. They say, you got to be willing to die before you quit. Because those that quit, what they have to do is voluntarily ring a brass bell 3 times in front of everybody, in front of their whole class, all of their peers. And they take this class helmet that they have on with their family name on it and their rank and the class number. And after they ring that bell 3 times, signifying that they have voluntarily quit from the program, they put the helmet down underneath the bell. And those helmets remain underneath that bell all throughout SEAL training in the chronological order that these guys quit in. And so as training continues and it gets more vigorous, more difficult, you just see this lineup of helmets with all of these family names on it. And you could remember like what it was that took out so and so, like what it was, why they aren't with us anymore. And so I just knew I'm not going to be one of those guys. And really, it comes down to the why. I think it was Nietzsche that said, not a good guy, but he said a thing that was very true. He says that he who has a why can endure anyhow. And so you could get through anything if your why is good. And I think that's what SEAL training does. It pressure tests your why. And that's true for anybody, anywhere going through anything. Sometimes I get moms that tell me, oh, wow, you Navy SEALs, I could never do something like that. It's like, I don't know. It matters what you put on the line, your why. What if they said, if you don't get through Hell Week, your children are going to be executed. Like suddenly Mama Bear comes out. That's when Mama Bear could lift a vehicle off of her children. And so it's really your why. What are you doing this for? And along the way, those reasons will mature. I actually probably started off with a very immature why. My why initially was just because I thought Navy SEALs are awesome rock stars. I would like to be like that. I like watching the movies. I like watching movies like the heroes like Batman and Punisher. I want to be one of those guys. That probably wasn't a good enough why, but that's what kickstarted it. And then the why became a lot more serious when that mentor that I was just talking about, Scott Helvenston, he'd taken an operation to go overseas. He took an opportunity to go over to Iraq one last time. I'm on the phone with him as he's leaving, and he's telling me, all right, Junior, I'm about to go do this thing. He's referring to going to Iraq. And he says, I just want you to know something, though, that I've never told anyone I've ever trained before. So I'm listening hard. And he says, I know you are going to make it through SEAL training. And to hear those words from somebody that I looked at as I idolized him. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait. That gave me the biggest confidence. And I was excited to do this and make him proud. That was my last conversation. Next time I saw him was on a TV screen, first smiling. I see a picture of him smiling, and I'm just puzzled. I'm like, what is Scott doing on TV right now? And as I look at the lower third of the screen, that's where I see his birth date followed by a dash, and it says March 31st, 2004. And before I could process even what that means, it switches from the smiling picture of Scott to now looking at graphic video footage, starting off with a vehicle that's engulfed in flames in Fallujah, Iraq, which turned out to be the very vehicle that he was in, along with 3 other Americans. And then it cuts to these scenes as this group of insurgents that had ambushed this vehicle began to document. They're videotaping everything that they're doing. And the media has gotten a hold of this footage, and now they're playing this sort of montage of scenes, where I'm watching my mentor and these 3 others lifeless in the streets of Iraq with this mob around them, gathering sticks and rods and doing everything they can to mutilate their bodies. And I'm watching the people that are doing this, and they just have pure celebration, glee all over their faces. It's like for them, it's like a 4th of July parade as they drag them through the streets, as they wrap rope around their legs, drag their lifeless bodies through the streets, arrived at the Euphrates River Bridge, strung them upside down, and then they set their bodies on fire. And the message they had for us in America, they made it explicitly clear as they chanted over and over into the camera in Arabic. They were chanting, Fallujah's the graveyard of Americans. Fallujah's the graveyard of Americans. And so pretty needless to say, I'll never have the words to describe what, that moment and all the surrounding moments were like. It is one of those things that it'll just cause you to go through every little, like every facet of the spectrum of just the grief. And I honestly landed on a sense of anger. I wanted revenge. And Scott became really like the capital Y for me to make it through training. I remembered his words when he says, Junior, I know you're going to make it through SEAL training. It just became that much more important. I got to do this. I got to do this in honor and memory of him. I want to walk in his footsteps. And at the time, I wanted to get some get back for him. And so I wrote his name on the inside of my hat. And so my thinking there, that's where the why really changed. It was no longer just a thing to do because it's neat, or because it's amazing, because it's flashy. It just became so much more important. I got to do this in honor and memory of him. I just felt like there was something really missing, but maybe when I become a SEAL, maybe everything will begin to kind of make sense. It'll all coalesce. I'll have that sort of peace, and so my thinking on that was this: I had his name on the inside bill of my hat. I would look at that name whenever I was suffering, just suffering in training. I'd
Mm.
look at that name and think to myself, you have to take me out of here in a body bag before I ever quit on that name. It's not happening.
Now,
And
did you, when's the first time you made it to Iraq?
I would say probably about 2008, 2009, kind of crossing over in there. Yeah. So
5 months
what
later.
happened with Scott, yeah, happened March 31st, 2004. Yeah.
So when you went your first operation in Iraq, were you angry? Were you hateful? Like you just want to get back at them? What was your feeling when
That's
you?
a good question. Yeah, a lot transpired in between what happened with Scott and by the time I was out in Iraq. And one of the biggest game changers is a real game changer. I became a Christian.
Oh,
Yeah.
how did that
So,
happen?
well, after I became a SEAL, I had this expectation that I'm a SEAL now. I finally become what Scott was. And I thought I would just feel this. I don't know what I was expecting. This superhuman power. I thought I'd have some kind of fulfillment out of this, like an everlasting satisfaction. The reality is that that graduation day was one of the happiest, most fulfilling moments I've ever experienced in my life. But it didn't take more than 24 hours before I felt like the wind was coming out of that sail, and everything slowly began to go downhill and circle a drain from that point forward. I couldn't wrap my mind around why. I mean, I just achieved the ultimate, and
Uh,
it was a Christian philosopher I heard on the radio years later spoke these words. And I thought, man, that's exactly what I experienced graduation day. This is what he says. He says, one of the loneliest moments a man will ever experience is when he's achieved that which he thought would deliver the ultimate. And in the end, it lets him down.
mm,
What he's referring to right there is something I believe every human being watching this program right now is familiar with, at least to some degree. Sometimes we talk about it as the human condition. Sometimes we refer to it as the grass is always greener on the other side. Not quite happy, not quite fulfilled, not satisfied where we're at. We're always looking off to something else. Well, what do you want, man? Oh, I just want a little bit more. And so we buy in this belief like, if I just had a little bit more, maybe what I'm missing, you think, is a relationship. I need a spouse. Or maybe what we're missing is a bigger home. Maybe I need to make more money. Maybe we need some little children running around the house. That'll give me that everlasting fulfillment. So what happens is you keep moving the marker and you keep getting to that place, and it satisfies for a little bit, but it's never everlasting. You just
mm,
get hungry and thirsty all over again. Well, the big point of this quote of one of the loneliest moments a man will ever experience is when he's achieved that which he thought would deliver the ultimate. In the end, it lets him down. What happens when you finally have moved the marker to a place where you can't elevate it any more than that? You're at the last rung of the ladder,
mm.
and yet you're still hungry and thirsty for more. You've climbed that mountain as high as it goes. You're at the peak of Mount Everest, and yet you're still hungry and thirsty for more, just like all of the other times, except this time is different because this time you can't just say, I'll go to the
Let
next.
me ask you
One
this.
of
I'm
them.
sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you, and we want to get to further end of the show how you came to Christ. But my thing is like, how long it took you to from the day you went into boot camp to the day where you graduated as a SEAL? How long was that?
Oh, I went pretty much in a straight line as fast as one could go. So I went into boot camp by April of 2004, and I believe December 2005, I had that trident on my chest. I was a
You
SEAL.
were a SEAL, and what was it? Where was your first operation?
The first time I operated was out in the Philippines. Yeah, so this is a beautiful place. I'm going to the Philippines thinking, what am I doing here? I really wanted to go off to Iraq. I got attached to SEAL Team 7. And there were guys that were out in Iraq. There's guys out in Afghanistan. We got SEALs deployed all over the world as we speak. That's not really a secret. But I was kind of bummed that I didn't get Iraq as the assignment. I get the Philippines. Get out there to the Philippines. Got out there a little bit ahead of some of the other teammates I'm supposed to be linking up with. And I remember hopping in the water just to kind of kill some time. I had my fins, I had my watch on, my snorkel, my mask, just beautiful paradise. It's like Hawaii, maybe even better. And then finally, I link up with a lead petty officer, the assault leader. And I go, wow, man, I can't believe we're, going to be spending so much time out here. This is paradise. He goes, yeah, yeah. He kind of had this 1,000-mile stare. And I was like, what's the deal with this guy? He goes, he's looking right past me. He goes, you see that little nipa hut right behind
Yeah.
you? And I turn around, I look behind me. He's like, yeah. He goes, there's the coffins of 10 Filipino Marines in there right now that are dismembered. Because they came down the same road that we came down to get here. They were ambushed. It was the Abu Sayyaf.
Oh, yeah.
And they killed them. They mutilated their bodies, and they actually got a hold of these soldiers' phones, their cell phones, and they took pictures of them with their own cell phones,
Mm.
and then they scrolled through the contacts, found their spouses, and sent pictures of these dismembered
Wow.
Marines to their spouses from their own phones.
Huh.
He's like, yeah, man, we got work to do out here. And so that was a real wake up call. And so, yeah, there's a real nasty group out there. They're still very active right now. And I think to some degree, they would make ISIS look like child's play, the Abu Sayyaf
Mm.
out there in the Philippines. And so we were out there in a sort of advise and assist role. There's actually a version of Navy SEALs out there in the Philippines we're working with called the Filipino Navy SEALs. And so that was the first objective that I was ever given, the first assignment to deploy out there to the Philippines in an advise and assist operations
And
to try and knock off that
did you
list.
make it to Mosul, Iraq?
No, no, outside of Mosul, I was all kind of up and down the Al Anbar
Yeah.
province. Yeah.
So now, with all that endorphin when you were training and when you were fighting and when you're in operation, and the endorphins are so high, and now that you're in a safe zone, you're married, you have kids, and
Hmm.
what gets you going? I mean, what do you feel like you need to do
Yeah.
activities like jump off a plane to feel the endorphins again? What do you do? How do you handle that? Boom.
That's a good question. There's a number of things that still kind of get me going. One of them initially, like right off the bat, that really got me going, and it's funny you brought up that analogy of jumping off a plane, is I'm out in Huntington Beach, and Huntington Beach is the stomping grounds of Ray Comfort. He does a
Oh,
lot
I
of
know
open
Ray.
air
I love. We had
preaching.
him on the
Yes.
podcast. I love Ray.
Oh yeah, he's awesome. He's a spiritual mentor to me. Yeah, big time. In fact, I probably wouldn't be on this podcast right now if it wasn't for Ray.
Mm.
I wouldn't have a book out if it wasn't for Ray. He is the reason that all of this came together. And so, just the way that God would have it, how He has pre-appointed our times and our boundaries. I didn't know that Ray Comfort was Ray Comfort. I live in Huntington Beach, and I've got this guy out there that's doing this open air preaching, and that's right there on my front porch. Basically, I get to go observe and learn from him. In fact, the first time I ever encountered Ray, I remember I wasn't really sure if he was a Christian or not, just because I didn't hear the context of the conversation. But I see he's out there with like this big monkey, like ape looking thing in the plaza at Pier Plaza in Huntington Beach. And I hear him talking about evolution. And so I thought that he was like trying to promote and popularize evolution at first.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like a brand new believer. And I just got done reading Case for
Yeah,
Christ. I just got done reading More Than a Carpenter.
I
Like
had both of
I
them
am,
on the
I am,
podcast. I'm not trying to promote, but I had Josh
no, no,
and Lee Strobel on the podcast too.
yeah.
We had a
And
seat.
so
Yeah, keep going.
I'm ready to engage. And I soon realized, wait a minute, this guy's not the antagonist. He's not the atheist. He's a Christian. And he has this massive crowd of people around him. I mean, like 100 people. And suddenly I realized the crowd is very antagonistic towards him.
Mm.
And so one guy that's heckling him the most, I'm thinking here, I'm an active SEAL.
I can beat him
I'm
up.
just in my hometown. Yeah, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to let this guy on the box do his thing, and I'll handle this guy right here that's bothering him. And so I go to confront this guy that's heckling him. And Ray's first words ever to me is he goes, excuse me, sir, that's my heckler. I prayed for him. And I look at him like, what? You want this? And so I would learn later that actually it is preferred that he would pray for these hecklers to show up, because what it does is it creates this sort of spectacle that people are just gravitate towards, right? I mean, people love a good argument out there, and so you can argue without being argumentative, right? And so that's what Ray would do. He would engage with these hecklers, which would create this massive crowd. It turned 10 people into 100 people. And then once he had the crowd, boom, the gospel. So 100 people hear the gospel, not in a church, not at an outreach, in a very public place, the secular world. 100 people will hear, the full gospel preached by Ray. And so I was so attracted to that. And I love to watch. I was a spectator. I would do evangelism like one-on-one, maybe one with a little group of 2 or 3. And he asked me if I've ever done it before. I said, no. He goes, have you ever considered doing it? I'm like, no. And he goes, have you ever jumped out of an airplane before? I'm like, oh yeah. And it was fresh. I actually had just finished free fall school. And he goes, yeah, I heard that that first step on the box is a lot like taking that first step out of the airplane. And I don't know why, but my ego is like, no, it can't be like that. And so he goes, oh, you don't think so? Why don't you get on up on that box there, Navy SEAL? And I'm like, oh no, all right, he's got me here. And so with no intention of ever actually doing it, I love to watch, never thought I'd be the guy. I wind up getting up there on the box. And immediately, before I even said a single word, I was already being heckled in my hometown by my home crowd. Just people tearing me apart based off of the T-shirt that I was wearing, which is actually a popular shirt brand. But they were just giving it to me. And you got people that are just trying to throw questions and objections at you. I'm trying to share the gospel. I'm trying to engage with the people. The rush I felt out of that was so equivalent to the feeling of like being shot at. Like, so you ask, like, how do you get that fix? Oh, open air preaching will always give you that fix. In fact, people say that public speaking is the number one fear, and after that is death. And so people are more afraid to get up and publicly speak than they are of death. They rather die than do that. But I would say even more so, most places that people get up to speak, it's typically a controlled environment. It's a monologue. People know that you're showing up to speak there. When you go do open air preaching in the public, that is not a controlled environment. It is utter chaos. You will have people laying hands on you. Like it is, you are surrounded on all sides. And you have to put the ego aside, because everyone is doing everything they can, for the most part, to try and make you look like a fool. And we're fools for Christ's sake. We're out there sharing the gospel. So that'll never stop. That'll always be a major adrenaline rush to do that. You go into it dragging your feet, as Ray says, but you always come away clicking your heels. You went to bat for the Lord that day.
How often do you do that?
I used to do it on a regular weekly basis. I got to be honest with you. It has been a long time. And so even as I'm speaking about it right now, I'm thinking about how I need to get back out there again. And especially because I have a group of young adults that I teach on a weekly basis here in Huntington Beach. And I need to get them out there and show them how to do that as well. This is what the Apostle Paul would do, Acts chapter 17, and Peter, in Acts chapter 2. And so it's open air preaching. I think that it was Spurgeon that thought that, any preacher, before he starts preaching in the pulpit, the first pulpit he should be in is out there on the street corners.
Right. What makes you cry, Chad?
What's that?
What makes you cry? Do you even...
Oh, yeah. I'll be honest with you. Like I'm like maybe a little prideful in that area. Like it's hard to get me to shed a tear. That's a good question. That's funny. Yeah.
What makes you sad then? If you don't, I'm like you. I don't cry much. It doesn't. Not many things move me. I mean,
yeah. I watched it. It's funny because it's out of nowhere. I watched this YouTube video the other day of this guy. He's pretty popular. I asked my wife about him. She knew the name. I forget the name, but he was just going out there and helping people that he was just helping them like financially or paying for their groceries. Or the one that really struck me was his father and the son. And the father had some type of terminal cancer, and this guy didn't even know that. And he went up and he helped the father and son out in some way. I forget what it was, that he paid for something for them. He took care of them somehow. And the son was so grateful. And then he informed the guy about how my dad, he had cancer, but he's fought it. I think that the prognosis, it was looking better, like he's not going to die. and he ended up paying for them to go to some type of sports game. I forget if it was like baseball or football or basketball, but he just really gave them the time of their life that day, and that definitely struck a chord in my heart. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
You're right.
Yeah.
We're so like that. These are the things that move me too. Speaking of games, Chris Rossetti from San Francisco said, my San Francisco Giants make me cry." It's not funny, Chris. We're serious right here. But
Yeah.
what do you call
Target makes me cry.
it's funny. I saw a video
Yeah.
where you proposed to your wife on the red carpet because
Yeah.
what do you call Daniel's Jewelry, where they picked you to be the.
Ah, yeah, this is so bad. Robbins Brothers. Yeah, Robbins Brothers.
I'm sorry. I said Daniel's Jewelry. I'm sorry.
No,
Okay,
it's all right.
so what was that? How long were you dating before you asked her to marry you?
I was just telling my daughter about this because she's 10 turning 11 soon. I go, I met mommy when she was 15 years old. We were
Mm,
in high school. And so I'd been with her for a very long time. By that time, we're looking at about what, 2010 there.
mm,
I met her probably like 2001. So we've been dating a long time, kind of an on and off relationship. What really split us up was I became a Christian in 2007, and that put us apart. And I thought that was it. She was already the girl I wanted to marry, and then when I became a believer, I was thinking, God, you could take anything from me. And I had a lot of stuff that he was cleaning up shop on. All my old friends were turning their backs on me. A lot of teammates, you know. And I was like, I'm fine with that. I could have nothing, but don't ever take Aubrey away. I don't think I could survive that. And he took her away. And so I
mm.
was like, all right, well, I'm still here, Lord. I'm not bailing. And so just stood the test, stood that trial. Little did I know that God was going to work it all out. And it was about a year later, a very slow, painful year when I never imagined it was like only God could do that. When I thought there really is not a chance anymore, there really is no hope. God got a hold of her and she became a believer. So that was the thing that actually split us up. And so that was the thing that brought us back together.
Did she call you
And
and tell you? How did you find out she became a believer?
first was this. She contacted me after having not talked in a long time, and she wanted to know what happened to me. Because when I became a Christian, it was radical. It was a radical change. I was trying to change everybody. I'm trying to change her, my brother, everyone. I was like a bull in a china shop. I was looking back, I did not exactly have the greatest tact in it, but I just knew that I was blind. Now I see, and other people need this too. And it's right there. They don't even realize it. They just need to wake up. And so she just wanted to know what happened. And I'm like, well, I try to explain it to her and share the gospel, share my testimony. And I was kind of curious why she asked. And she just was kind of beginning to share that she just felt like she couldn't go do the things that we used to go do,
Mm,
the partying and stuff like that, without feeling bad about it. And she wasn't sure what it was. And she thought it was God. And she didn't like it. She goes, but I don't want to feel bad about it. I'm like, that's good. That's conviction. That means you're not beyond feeling. It means your conscience isn't seared. That's a good thing. She's like, no, I don't want to feel like this. And so I just kept praying towards that. And so it's through a series of conversations, really just over like Skype when that was the thing. And eventually we met up when I was back home. We met up on the south side of the pier in Huntington Beach in the parking lot. She had a lot of questions. I'm still a pretty new believer. I'm only like a little over a year into it. But for whatever reason, every question she had, I had my Bible right there in the center console of my truck. I had an answer. I knew exactly where to go. And that's totally the Lord. That's one of those, like, he'll give you the words when you need it. I
yeah.
had an answer. Every question she had, I knew where to turn, pull it up. Next thing you know, she's ready. She's ready to pray and make that commitment to the Lord. And so after sharing the gospel with her there, we prayed together and she repented and put her faith and trust in Jesus as the risen Savior and Lord. And it stood the test too. I had to leave. I had to deploy to Iraq shortly after that. And I thought, I could be here by her side for a while. I can make sure that we go to church together, but eventually I'm going to be gone. And so when I was in Iraq for 7 months, that's where she really stood the test, and she continued it. She was going to church, doing the midweek services and Sunday services, and going with my family, and they never got along really before because her and I together were kind of like a Bonnie and Clyde in the past. But so my parents, they didn't really think we're good for each other. But totally different now. I'm calling home from Iraq, and my folks would be like, "Oh, Aubrey's over, and we're all going to go to the midweek study." And it's
Uh,
like, "Wow, Lord, all right, Lord, this is the girl I wanted to marry. So when I get back home from Iraq, I'm going to be asking her to marry me." Yeah,
what
and
did, what
so
did, what did you learn in the Navy SEAL training that helped with your marriage?
mental toughness. Oh, I wish there was something I could just point to right away. I am by no means any expert, you know. I think that every guy just kind of figures it out along the way. If anything, I've learned to take advice from people that are a little bit ahead of me in life because that's very helpful. It was helpful having that mentor, Scott. And I learned that's sort of the warp speed. If you want some shortcuts, there's no pill that you could take. There's no instant gratification. But the closest thing we have to time travel, I think, is getting some mentors that could speak some real wisdom into your life. And so I started taking advice as a Navy SEAL from people that were ahead of me in life instead of having to learn the hard way. And maybe that's one of the big things that has been helpful. But I don't always operate on that principle still, like I am foot and mouth all the time. I'm blowing it.
Now, is it true? Were you for a while? You were like the bodyguard for Greg Laurie, or no?
No, I don't know where you heard that.
I don't know where that came from because I know his bodyguard is Dennis Agajanian's son,
Yeah, Luke.
the Goliath guy.
Yeah, Luke
Yeah,
Academia. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, that's there's just I don't know why, but you wrote the book, The Seal
I
of
could
God.
see how like people always try to get me involved in security when I was going to church there, but
Oh yeah,
I was like, no, like I got out to get involved in ministry, like, and I'm not trying to discount and act like, doing security work isn't ministry, but I mean, I got involved to be an evangelist, but
I
yeah,
still don't understand. I do some event throughout the year where I have to have a bodyguard with me. They hire him. I don't ask for him. I never want him. I tell them
yeah,
nobody's after me, but they say, hey, the clients wants to make sure they're safe.
they do that
Because
to me
for their
too.
own protection,
Yeah.
they have to have. I was like, okay, I don't need anybody. But so my thing is, when you wrote the book, The Seal of
Well,
God.
going back to that, have fun with that next time. You're a comedian. What you got to do, I do this all the time. They
uh
put somebody on you, shake
Yeah.
them, lose them. Tell
Oh,
like misdirect them
you're
like
the
over
man.
there. It's the funnest thing in the world. I'll just disappear on them and then I'll watch them from a distance and I'll see the panic in the security's eyes. They're like, "Oh no, where did he go? Where did my principal go?"
No,
And
I do the other way. I go, watch out, this guy. This guy's. I think he has a gun. I think this guy's looking
uh,
at me weird. I think this, and I just go around and just make it.
yeah, that little old lady right there. Oh, she harasses me everywhere she goes.
I had a guy once. I'm like, hey, they walk into your hotel room before you get in, and I said, listen, I really don't. Nobody's after me. He goes, listen, I need to make a living for my family too. Okay. I go, okay, go ahead. Hey, watch out for me.
Yeah.
So tell me about the Seal of God book. What is that? What is some points like people when they read it? What do you think the points they get out of it?
Yeah, well, going back to Ray, he's the reason that book happened. At the time, he'd been really impressing upon me because he knew it was important that it happened. He's like, "You need to write a book." And I was like, "Yeah, Ray, one day." I'm picturing like way later in life, like decades down the road, maybe I'll do that. He goes,
Mm,
"No, you really need to write a book, and here's why. You're gonna write all these Navy SEAL stories in there." I go, "Yes, the thing though is like when SEALs get out and write these stories, it's kind of frowned upon by the active SEALs. They call it cashing in on the trident." He goes,
mm,
"This isn't what we're doing. You're going to share these Navy SEAL stories in the beginning. Don't share the gospel or anything like that. Share the SEAL stories to draw young men in, to draw people in. And then at the very end, we're going to put the gospel on that pedestal. And
mm.
so you do it for the gospel." And when he started putting it that way, I can kind of see, but I still didn't want to do it. And then he's really good at kind of getting my ego a little bit. He got me open air preaching that way. And so he goes, "Listen, Navy SEAL, I'm working on," and at the time he was working on, I think it was 7 different books
Mm,
simultaneously with 3 different publishers and working on a script for his TV series, The Way of the Master. It was like
yeah.
season 5. And he goes, "You could do one. You could do one book if I could do all of that. And so I was like, and so we ended up going off to, I almost said Iraq, Israel. We went to Israel together.
Oh, wow.
And he just found an excuse to bring me along, which I'm so grateful for. They didn't need me out there. And so they were filming a TV program. And he goes, well, you know, I imagine as a Navy SEAL, since you could shoot a gun, you probably could shoot a camera. It's just pointing. I was like, yeah, Ray, I could do that. He goes, all right, we'll have you do our behind the scenes filming and we'll bring you out there with the camera. So we do that. And what a blast to be out there and going through like the Garden of Gethsemane and seeing like, the Sermon on the Mount location. And we're on the shoreline of Caesarea where Paul was. And he
Hmm.
says, I want to pray one last time about you doing a book. And I promise I won't bother you anymore after this, but let's pray about doing a book. And I'm thinking, good, let's get this prayer out of the way so that he doesn't ask me anymore.
You prayed at Caesarea.
At Caesarea on the
Yeah.
shoreline, we pray.
Yeah.
And something happened there. That's all I could say. Something happened. And there was a spark that fanned into flame that did not exist before, where I had zero desire to do this. Now I had a fire to do it. And I remember when we got back, Ray told me, he goes, you are going to write a book and you're going to call it Seal of God. And it's going to sell thousands of copies. And you are going to go all over the nation and you are going to preach the gospel in so many churches. And he added one other little bit on there too. And that one's yet to be fulfilled, but I do think it will happen. And he wasn't saying, thus saith the Lord, but man, it was prophetic. Everything he said, the book happened. It's called Seal of God. It's sold over 100,000 copies. I was just looking at the number of churches I've spoken in. I've spoken in over 400 churches across the nation just over the past, half decade. And so it's like, wow, Ray. And so the book is kind of, I alluded to it. It's a biography. It's my story of growing up, a little bit of that, just to kind of kickstart things. I grew up like a lot of kids, playing sports, skateboarding, but I didn't have like a real drive, a thing to aim at. And if you aim at nothing, you will hit it. And so failing out of my junior college, that's where I just came up with that idea of becoming a SEAL. And it really is a story about how a guy could go from like truly nothing. Like all my peers were passing me by. I'm failing. I went from that to like, I went for this. I decided this is going to be my passion. And I became a SEAL. Everything that, all the experiences I had with Scott Halvinston, such an extraordinary Navy SEAL. You guys got to hear a little bit about him. And then what SEAL training is like. I got some good chapters on, some insights on that. And then going overseas, what it's like on the battlefield, getting set up on an ambush, the last operation I was ever involved in, or capturing a guy wounded but alive. And, here's one of the guys, when that young man that I was looking through a TV screen, thinking of what I would like to do if I can get my hands on one of these guys, here I'm a Christian now, and this guy's wounded but alive. And the thing that we learn in the SEAL teams, and this is true just based off of a Christian principle morale too, you preserve life wherever possible. So this guy that was a lethal threat, that was literally setting us up to be killed, and now he's no longer a lethal threat. We've got him. He's wounded and vulnerable, but not armed. What do? We save his life. And I was actually given the personal responsibility, along with one other guy, to carry this guy into our hospital. This guy that was just trying to kill us, we're
Wow.
carrying him now into our hospital. I remember looking down at him and thinking, like, man, you are so lucky I became a Christian, because I don't know how I would have handled this moment, had this been the sort of BC days, the kid with the chip on the shoulder, the kid that wanted to get some get back, for his mentor. So in a very peculiar way, talk about coming full circle and getting some closure. The last thing I ever did in Iraq is the last thing I ever imagined I'd be doing, was actually carrying one of these guys in our own hospital. That was our last operation before we went home.
That's
And
great to
so,
hear that. I don't want to interrupt that, but
oh
because a
yeah,
lot of people sometimes I speak a lot in Germany for our army, and and Ramstein for the airmen and navy, and some people have this idea, especially people from other countries and stuff, that the American military is just like abusive and just kills and stuff. No, you don't hear that. You hear that, okay, we need to save lives. We're not there to,
hmm,
yeah, once someone is not a threat, then you save them, right?
that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, preserve life wherever possible. That's the principle right there.
that's awesome. And if any of you, okay, I cut you short with the book. So You shared stories about being a Navy SEAL and stuff, and the exercise. What was your worst exercise that you hated when you were a Navy SEAL?
That's easy. It's we call them evolutions, right? These exercises. My most unfavorite was what we called surf torture. And surf torture is going out into the surf zone. I went through in February, the coldest month out of the year in that Pacific. That water temperature is so cold, it just takes your breath away. And
Mm.
you lay down in that surf zone and you link arms with your buddies and you just stay there until you begin to shiver. And the shivering turns into, we call it jackhammering. You look like you're hanging on to a jackhammer, and there's never any end in sight. And these instructors, you don't know what the end is. They don't say 5 more minutes, they will play head games with you. And so you will be there when you think that the human body can only maybe take 5 more minutes of this. And what they'll say is, we're going to keep doing this for the next 2 hours. And you're just like, man, I guess like I'm gonna die here in the water. I can't quit. Or they'll say, hey, we're gonna keep doing this until, and they'll just pick an arbitrary number. Three of you give up and quit. And so if they broadcast a number like that, you better believe it. They're gonna keep going until they get that number they said that they're gonna get. They will not be made a liar. And so now you're in this battle of attrition with these guys on your left and right that have already endured and suffered through so much. These are tough guys. And so now it's kind of like mono against, man against man in those moments right there. And all I can say is I had to dig deeper than I ever have in my entire life in those surf tortures to make sure that I stayed put and didn't get up out of that water. To put it in perspective, in Hell Week, you're up for 5.5 days long. You get 4 hours of sleep. That's not per night. That's 4 hours for the next 5.5 days. And during that time, you get surf tortured a lot. But also during that time, you run over 200 miles carrying a telephone log or a boat wherever you go with your boat crew. And
Right.
I would say that the running with the boat for 5.5 days with beach sand and salt water, rubbing and grinding in all the unfriendly places and not getting any sleep, that was child's play. All of that is child's play in comparison to how awful surf tortures are. And so surf tortures are the worst
And
by
you
far.
live in Huntington Beach to remind yourself of that torture every single morning.
What's funny is I would say for at least a couple weeks after Hell Week is over, if you're walking on the sidewalk and you can have boots on, that water's not going to get through your boots. But if you're walking on the sidewalk and you saw even the slightest bit of a puddle of water, the reaction, I would see it along with other guys. We would see the water and we would walk around it. And just by seeing it, you would kind of go back into this mode of like you would shiver for a moment
Mm.
because you're just so just water. So I'd see it, I go,
Does Aubrey have to treat you different after you came back for as a
no,
Navy SEAL after you were done? Just
no,
I don't want to trigger him or I don't want to do stuff.
no, no. My brother, a funny thing is like he totally messed with me when I got back home. I think like the first thing he ever did was probably not smart, but he had some kind of like Pringles can. And he goes, hey, I can't get this Pringles can open. Can you get it for me? And what I didn't know is there was something spring loaded in there that was going to be like popping out of my face. He meant well. He actually realized in hindsight he really should not have probably done that. I was probably a little edgy then, because you gotta have like an aggressive posture when you're overseas. You gotta have situational awareness. You gotta be on point because everything and anything can kill you. Why is that stick there in the street? Are they trying to mark a location? Are they waiting for us to run that stick over so that they could time it so they could blow us up? Like why does that, just you're always observing everything. And so yeah, that kind of got me a little bit. But I haven't had, thankfully, praise God, I haven't had any issues, I would say.
Praise God.
Yeah,
Praise God.
yeah.
So, what is your next book gonna be called?
Maybe divine sabotage. I don't know. It's one of my. It kind of plays off of one of my favorite quotes by C.S. Lewis. He says, "Enemy occupied territory. That is what this world is. But
Mm.
Christianity is the story about how our rightful king has landed. You might say in disguise, and now he's calling us all to take part in his great campaign of sabotage." And so that campaign of sabotage is overthrowing the plans of the enemy of our soul, and we have divine justification to do it. This is from God. We are commissioned. And so I think of the enemy of our soul like a suicide bomber. Any suicide bomber, when they're strapped up, they're committed. They know they're going down, but they're not content with that. What do they want? They want more. They want to take out as many people with them as they possibly can in the process. And so they're going after families, they're going after anyone they can in the crowd. They would love to get service members. And so that's their version of success. If a Navy SEAL, special operations, anyone in the military, if they're successful at what they've been tasked to do, what have we been tasked to do? Stop people like that. Our goal is to sabotage their plans. And so
Right.
if we're successful, what happens is we sabotage their plans and lives are saved. But the people that you saved, and this is what I realized when I was in the teams, that at best we could save somebody's life, temporally speaking. Eventually they will die. Eventually they will grow old. There's no one is going to escape death. So you could save them for a little while only. But then I realized the spiritual application that Satan's like a suicide bomber. He's strapped, he's committed. He knows he's going down. We've read the back of the book. He's going to that lake of fire. But
Right.
like any suicide bomber, he's not content with going down by himself, is he? What does he want? His goal is take out as many people with him as he possibly can in the
Right.
process. That gets personal because he wants our family members. He wants our friends, our coworkers, our fellow citizens. But if every card-carrying Christian is successful at what they've been tasked to do, which is what? Well, every card-carrying Christian is a soldier. 2 Timothy chapter 2, we are soldiers for Christ. So just like special forces could sabotage the plans of a suicide bomber, us as special forces, and you are special forces in God's kingdom, if you're successful at what you do, you sabotage the plans of the enemy of our soul. And the way that we do that is with the greatest weapon that we have to charge the kingdom of darkness with, which is the gospel, because the gospel message is the power of God unto salvation. It sets captive people free that were caught in the crosshairs of the enemy. And so I realized that as an active SEAL, and that's one of the big reasons I wanted to get out, was to get involved in saving somebody's life, not just temporally speaking, but beyond that, eternally speaking, that though a man shall die, he shall live. And so the second book, if the first one was sort of along the genre of biography, sharing the gospel and trying to make God just how to know God, I think that the second book would be something along the lines of how we make God known. So knowing God and making God known, taking part in that campaign of sabotage. It's the Great Commission. So just like Navy SEALs, we've been commissioned, been given a duty and a task. Jesus commissioned every Christian, every disciple to go and fulfill the mission. And so it would be a book along those lines, how to do that.
Amen. If your son said, "Dad, I want to be a Navy SEAL," what would you say?
My heart would sink and I would do everything I possibly could to try and talk him out of it. And if I could talk him out of it, then it probably definitely wasn't the thing that he should be doing. And if I can't talk him out of it, that's the kind of guy that you can't talk them out of it. They're going to go do it. It's
Anything.
because I selfishly love my son and I wouldn't want him to go into harm's way. It's one of those things where it's like, let me go do that. But anyone I love, I don't want them out there doing that. That's the selfish part, you know.
Anything funny happened when you were in any of the missions and stuff that you
Oh
remember?
man, so much funny stuff. Let's see how much time we got. What do we got?
Whatever you want. We don't have to be limited with time.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you have a hard ending or not. Let's see. Okay. No, I mean maybe some people think it's funny, maybe some people don't.
It's okay.
One of
That will make me laugh if I know.
Okay, all right. Let's go with this one. So most people think that the most difficult part of SEAL training is Hell Week, right? The 5.5 days that you're up, get 4 hours of sleep, all the hundreds of miles you run, thousands of push-ups and pull-ups, all that surf torture, the hallucinations I was talking about. But that's the most difficult part. The most difficult part of SEAL training actually comes the day before you graduate. And this is not recorded in my book. It's not in any SEAL book. It's not in any of the SEAL movies that are out there. The most difficult day of SEAL training is the day before you graduate. To kind of set it up, the first day of training, amongst all the tortures these instructors put you through, all those push-ups and pull-ups and surf tortures, I think that what most people don't know, and maybe there's an illusion to it, because you see on social media nowadays how special operations, Navy SEALs, we use dogs in our platoons. We got attack dogs and bomb dogs. What you might not know, you get a dog in the beginning of training. Everyone, you might think that's pretty cool because you get to start working with these little guys as puppies. But here's the deal, is that the last thing you ever want to deal with at the end of a very long day of training is some poopy peeing dog keeping you up all night, Nazareth. Like, this is the last thing the instructors know, the sleep deprivation this animal is going to put you through. But you know that saying, man's best friend. It's true. Whether you like it or not, this dog does kind of begin to grow on you as you're looking out for him. He's your little ally, your little buddy. So I named my dog Nacho. All right. It's like joke around, like give the chips to the kids. Nacho. But like I said, getting around to this most difficult day of training, the day before you graduate, you see, in order to demonstrate that as a Navy SEAL, you are prepared, if this is what's required of you, to take life. You have to take this dog that you've loved and looked out for it, and with your own bare hands, you have to turn and break its neck. I'm just playing with you. You don't
Oh,
do
yeah.
that to a dog in SEAL training. No, no,
No
no.
problem. Yeah. I can do it for my neighbor's dog, but not
Yeah.
my own.
So you actually do it to a cat.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just kidding. Yeah.
Of course. Of course.
All right, that's just a wives' tale that's out there in SEAL training. So just to be clear, anyone watching right now, all you
Yes, yes.
women out there that
Don't
probably
do
went
it.
like, I don't like this guy anymore. You know, like, just to
Yes.
be clear, you don't do that to any animal in SEAL training. But that's one of those wives' tales that's out there. So yeah, really a funny one. I mean, there's a number of funny things. I remember while we were in Alaska, we're doing cold weather training. And we had this guy in our class. I won't drop his name, but he was the toughest guy in the class. And he would go like to Mexico to go do cage fighting before cage fighting was even popular. Like he would go just down there and just do bare knuckle like cage fighting. He could take on like 4 or 5 Navy SEALs at a time. Like we would all jump on this guy. He was like Samson. No matter how many guys we jumped on top of him with, like he would throw all of us off of him, right? So he's the tough guy in the class. There's none like him. And part of that training, though, we were told that, you know, you're on Kodiak Island, you're going to encounter the Kodiak bears. And these bears are like the biggest bears. And basically, they said if one of these bears decides that it wants to kill you, there's not really anything you could do. And they actually took our bullets away. We had our guns, but we didn't have any rounds. I don't know
Wow.
why. I mean, that was part of the fear factor, I guess. And then they gave us this spray. They said, you know, if the bear comes after you, just spray him, but really the spray is not going to do anything. And we had a flare also. They said the best thing you could do is just get real big, puff up, and say, "Go away, bear, go away," make a bunch of noise. Well, we're out there. We've been out there for days doing this survival training, and you know, there's parts of the class we're linking up with each other that we haven't seen each other for days. You're kind of out there as an individual, then you link up with a buddy, then you got a pair. That pair turns to 4, that 4 turns to 8, and eventually these 8 turn to 16. So we link up, been out there for days. There's 16 of us together, and so we've created this huge like hideout, this hut with this big old fire. But in order for anyone to go to the bathroom, they can't go near our spot. You know, they got to go out there into the wilderness, into the dark. And so this tough guy, like some of us were already out there in the dark, in the outer darkness, and we see this tough guy, you know, he walks out, he's got to go to the bathroom, and he kind of gets a little ways away from, you know, the spot where everyone else is. And we just start making these growling noises. We're like, "Roar," and he can't see us. And you see this tough guy getting so scared. "Roar," and he's looking out there, and you can see him looking back to where he needs to run. And he knows he doesn't have like the time to get back to everyone else. And so you just see him slowly raising his hands, and he starts going, "Go away, bear, go away, go away, bear, go away." Oh man, we just die laughing. And suddenly he realizes that, you know, he's being pranked right now. This isn't a real bear. And we had to run for our lives. Like he became the bear. And he never was able to identify who did it. And if he ever found out, he'd probably break our ribs.
Oh,
You know, that's just one of the funny things that's happened. There's a number of funny things. I've had fish chum poured on us in shark infested waters and
yeah.
had to go for a swim for 5 miles. But before they did that, they had us watch video of shark attacks. It's like crazy stuff in training. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to read something real quick, and I just want to say, Paige said, "Thank you for your service and blessing to all our patriots." And then the next meaning said, "God is truly amazing to keep our minds, bodies, and the soul full, will to endure. God is so awesome. Continued success to you both. To God be all the glory." I want to ask you this as we're closing this podcast, and I
Sure.
can get enough. I would love to have you back, but w- give us some encouragement to some men who are lukewarm right now, or they don't know their why, or they don't know, or maybe they're Christians, but they haven't done much. Can you just take a
Yeah. I think one of the things that really fires us up in the Navy SEAL teams, you know, if there is any kind of warmness that needs to get incinerating, is we'll remember the legacy of those who have gone before us. And so before we go out and operate, maybe a Master Chief says something like, "Hey, good chance not all of you come back home alive or in one piece on this one." Had that happen. I don't care who you are, that could cause you to kind of grow a little cold inside, like, whoa. And so how does he fire up the team? Well, he doesn't leave you with that. One of the last lines of our SEAL Creed goes like this: that in the worst of conditions, I'll rely upon the legacy of those who have gone before me to steady my resolve, to guide my every deed. We retell the stories of guys like my mentor, Scott. We retell the stories of guys like Michael Mansour, who jumped on top of a hand grenade when he could have saved himself. He jumped on top of a hand grenade, covered it, absorbed the blast of that grenade, and he died. But because of what he did, all of the other SEALs that were around him that would have gotten hit, they all lived. Or even Michael Murphy. There's a really big workout that happens across the nation on Memorial Day called the Murph Challenge. Not a lot of people know that the Murph Challenge, it actually is about a guy named Michael Murphy. I'm astonished by how many people I've met that know about the Murph Challenge, but they have no idea about Michael Murphy. So Michael Murphy, this is one of his favorite workouts. That movie Lone Survivor, the reason there is a lone survivor is because of Michael Murphy, because of the actions that he took while they were in a gun battle in Afghanistan. Nobody even knew that they were in a gun battle, and they needed help, but they couldn't make communication. They couldn't get a radio call in. And so they're going from mountaintop to mountaintop, not getting these calls in. So he decided that he was going to expose himself as they're being ambushed by the Taliban on 3 different sides, that he was going to go out into the open where he could get a signal and really risk it all, like complete disregard for his own life, his own safety. And he made communication with the Tactical Operation Command so that they knew that there are SEALs, there's frogmen in a gunfight. And before he even finished all the coordinates, he was shot in the chest and dropped the satellite phone to the ground. But he had a job to finish, and so he picked that phone up after being shot in the chest, finished giving the coordinates, and his last words were "thank you." And he ultimately succumbed to the wounds that he was inflicted with. And so he absorbed the blast of these rounds. He suffered, he died, but because of what he did, Marcus Luttrell, he lived. And so you could say greater love has no one than this, one that lays down his life for his friends. And so in the worst of conditions, we rely upon the legacy of those who've gone before us to steady our resolve, to guide our every deed. That's what gets us fired up in the SEAL teams, remembering the legacy of those. And for any lukewarm Christian out there, maybe, just maybe, what could get you fired up is consider the legacy of Jesus of Nazareth that went to the cross. That just as my mentor Scott was killed and hung from a bridge, ultimately for freedom's sake, have you ever considered that your Savior was killed and he was hung from the cross of Calvary so you could be set free? Just as Michael Mansour and Michael Murphy, one absorbed the blast of a hand grenade, one absorbed the rounds of AK-47s. Like, they absorbed these. Why? So others could live. Have you ever considered that Jesus absorbed the blast? He absorbed the blows, he absorbed the hits, he absorbed the wrath of our sin upon himself at the cross. Why? So we could live with him in eternity. So greater love is no one than this, one that lays on his life for his friends. You could see it in men like Mike Mansour, Scott Helvenston, Michael Murphy, so many others have gone before us. For the lukewarm Christian out there, consider the cross. Look to the cross. That's the proper perspective of that King of Kings, that Lord of Lords, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And when I look at him and what he has done, considering the legacy of him who has gone before us and paid the ultimate price, I'm fired up to get out there and go make a difference, to go be on fire out there in the world for God. And I love what I think it was Charles Wesley, he's credited with this, is that if you set a man on fire for God, the world will come to watch him burn. People will come and they will see.
Amen. 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 Uh, I've seen you speak. You're amazing. You're powerful with men, with everybody. How can people get a hold of you and get a hold of your book?
Maybe the easiest way is just simply Google Navy SEAL Chad Williams. But my website, it's called sealofchrist.com. And while we're at it, I got workout programming that I put out there, daily workouts, and it's all scaled for people of all ages, sizes, and shapes. It's all scalable. But yeah, sealofchrist.com. Yeah.
Okay, now that I have it, okay, we're gonna extend this to a few minutes. So what is your workout like? What's your upper body workout like?
So typically, I try and do a lot of functional fitness for everybody. And so it's a lot of the kind of stuff you could do either at home or you could do in a hotel somewhere, because that's my lifestyle right now. Like, always out there traveling on the road. And so it's a lot of pull-ups and push-ups and sit-ups and dips, and then, burpees. There's exercises called Navy SEALs where it's you drop down on the ground, you do a push-up, kind of kick a leg up, throw it back, do another push-up, kick the opposite leg up, do it back, and do another push-up, and then you hop up in the air, We got 8 count bodybuilders, all kinds of just functional fitness. And then I do like to use a little bit of weight. Like I said, it's all scalable. People could build their own sandbags. It's like the easiest thing in the world to do with like a sandbag, sand, and throw a bunch of duct tape around it. Or you can get a slam ball. Just go buy one. And so I do a lot of slam ball work, a lot of stuff from the ground to overhead. And this is the kind of stuff that I mean, it'll just it'll make you functionally fit so that when it's time to like go grab all the Costco boxes out of the back of the wife's, Suburban or whatever, it's like I could balance a bunch of these things, like I feel good going up the stairs and running down the stairs, getting out of bed. And so it's not real heavy jacked weight lifting, which I have a past of doing that. That was a pastime favorite. But I got to be honest, I've never felt as good as I feel now, just doing a lot of these body weight, calisthenic type functional fitness programming that I've been doing.
And where can people find those?
On sealofchrist.com. And so if they go to sealofchrist.com and they go to the upper right hand corner, there's a button that says fitness on it. Yeah.
sealofchrist.com.
Yep.
Alrighty, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Chad, for taking the time from your family and young kids to be with me. I know we're going to work together again, and I know it'll be wonderful. So I appreciate you so much. And pastors, leaders, before you plan any men's conference or anything, you have to go to Chad Williams, sealofchrist.com, and just have him come to your church, to your conference, to your convention, to your retreat. Oh, men's retreat. This man is amazing, and he really fires up the people. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll connect very soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. And thank you guys for watching. I just, again, want to remind you that I will not be here for the next 5 weeks or 6 weeks. So if you don't see the podcast, we're not giving up on it. We'll be back after that, after I come back in July. So you can go to Nazareth USA and check my calendar and see where I'm going to be at. Hopefully you can come say hi to me and see the show. All right. Love you guys. Thank you so much. And God bless you. Have a great night. Thank you so much. Good night.